Hi, welcome back to the CCW Safe podcast. I'm Rob High, joined again by Phil Naman, and we have a special guest. You guys have met him before, Gary Eastridge, who is our critical response coordinator for the department. And today we were going to touch on some stuff. We've addressed this on multiple different times. We've had the very best in the industry answering questions, and it still seems to leave some people a little short. And it's basically concerning if I'm involved in a critical incident, do I talk to police? Do I have to give them any information? What would I say? What would you say? And Gary and I have both been in positions to be the responding investigators and things like this, and fully appreciate and respect anybody that steps forward and wants to wait until their attorney is present to answer questions. There's just several things that are kind of in that gray area that I can talk to those people. I can meet with a patrolman or an investigator. There's nothing wrong with me giving my personal information. You know, they need to know that biographical information. This is my names, my date of birth, this is where I live, my contact info, things like that. But Gary is our coordinator for our critical response team. And in the event that you were involved in an incident where you had to defend yourself, your family, and there was great bodily injury or death involved, we are coming out to be with you. We're going to help you through that process.
Can I ask a quick question here?
Certainly.
For those of us in the People's Republic of Occupied California, we don't get everything all the time, so we're kind of slow. That's why we still have that guy for governor. But you said a critical incident, and that involves bodily death. What is the actual definition of critical injury? I mean, isn't it anytime you've had to use some kind of force or even a brandishing issue? I mean, isn't that when you guys want to be called almost immediately on several different levels of things, not just if the firearm's gone off, right?
Phil, when you talk about a critical incident, we view a critical incident as one where somebody, either a member's family, or anybody in the incident has received a significant injury or death. That will prompt a in-person response from us. The more minor type incidents where you've brandished your firearm, or maybe you've even discharged your firearm, but no one has been hit, that will not prompt an in-person response by our critical response team. Okay. Not to be confused with what the law recognizes as, the things that are required before using lethal force, which is that threat of great bodily injury or death.
Sorry, go ahead, Rob.
It's just one of those deals that we always encourage our members that as soon as something happens, just for instance, I'm at home with my family. We have an intruder, and I believe that intent is to come in and injure somebody, to harm somebody. And depending on where you live, just the simple fact that they enter your home can be enough to mount a defense. But the big deal there is, as soon as something like that occurs, especially if I've discharged a firearm and shot somebody, if I don't have an active threat ongoing, I immediately want to check on the rest of my family, make sure everybody's safe, make sure that I'm safe. But the biggest deal for me is I want to be the guy to call 911. I don't want somebody next door calling and saying, hey, I heard shots fired at my neighbor's house or something like that. I want to be the guy to report. but I also want to start emergency services and get first aid and things like that, just in case. I mean, I may have somebody at the house hurt. I may be injured. It may be a non-lethal shot that I fired, but I want to get those medical services started as soon as I get the police on the way as well.
And to follow up on that a little further, Phil, in our experience in law enforcement, the first person that calls 911 is viewed as the victim until the evidence shows otherwise. And one of the issues we have had with members is they perceive a threat that warrants them to draw their firearm. That threat dissipates, but that person goes and calls 911. The member thinks, well, all is good, so they don't call 911. So now it's the attacker could be viewed as the victim since they're calling 911 to report, and our member is now viewed as a suspect until there is some evidence that would lead the investigators to believe otherwise. So it's important that you establish early on that you are a victim.
Well, and I would also fill in there, Gary, that a 911 call is something that me as an investigator, that's one of the first things I look at. I want to hear the tone of what's going on. I want to hear what's said, because that story can change. And that's why I want to keep that information to an absolute minimum. And that can be, this happened in my home or whatever the incident is.
Yeah. Rob, give us an example of a situation. Okay, boom, this happens. Yeah. You grab your phone, go.
And
911. What's your emergency?
Absolutely. My name's Rob. Hi, I live at this address. We had an intruder into our home. I was fearing for my life. I utilized my gun. I defended my home. The guy shot. I need emergency medical services.
Is anyone hit?
Yeah, I was a victim. I was only defending myself. I didn't.
Have you been hit?
Certainly. That's always going to be something that I want to make sure that everybody has done is if there is any possibility of injury, and you have to understand what an amazing machine our bodies are, the things that we can withstand and don't even realize it with this huge surge of adrenaline and all that stuff going on. So if there's any possibility that you have any kind of injury or anything like that, we want to get you to a hospital and get you checked out. If there's injuries and things, we want those properly documented.
So I was trying to say, like, if I was a 911 operator, these are the questions I would be asking you, right? Yeah. Have you been hit? Has the other person hit? How many people? What are they wearing? And one of the things that a 911 operator wants to do is to keep you talking, right?
Absolutely. They want to keep you on the line, but you need to understand that is part of that case file as soon as it starts. Once that goes to an investigator, that becomes part of my evidence. So if I'm the one that's involved in that incident, I'm going to keep it brief. I'm going to check on my family and say, we'll be standing by for the officers as they get here. The front door is unlocked or whatever. So
you're not going to be running down the street with your pistol in your hand saying, hey, over here, right? Probably
no,
not going to do that.
All. Yeah. I worked a case where the gentleman was defending himself. It was in a driveway. And I thought he handled it as well as he possibly could. He fired one round, dropped a suspect. He secured his firearm in his vehicle, locked it, had his daughter call 911. She gave the information, said, we need police and an ambulance here. And by the time the officers showed up, the man who was involved is a physician, and he was already rendering aid to the suspect. That's what the officers saw when they arrived. And, you know, it's a case by case thing. I mean, do I have the ability to safely do that kind of thing? But he did in this case. And as soon as the officers got there, he let them know I was attacked. I had to defend myself. I've secured my firearm in my vehicle. Can you tell me if that ambulance is on the way? Because he's providing medical attention. It was a really, really well done case by this guy. So,
and conversely, we just had that recent case within the last few weeks where a young man defended a police officer who was being attacked. The police officer ended up dying. When other responding officers showed up, the Good Samaritan still had the suspect's long gun in his hand, and responding officers perceived a lethal threat, and unfortunately the young man lost his life. I mean, it's just a worst case scenario for me personally to be viewed. So like Phil was talking about, you don't want to be running down the street with a gun in your hand. You don't want to have a gun in your hand.
Sometimes you don't even realize it.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
You know, you've got that adrenaline dump, right? And you guys have seen all these cases, you know, you're fighting for your life. And when I was younger, those things happened, and you got such a dump of adrenaline. You don't even really, number one, you got blabbermouth disease. And number two, you don't even know really, your fine-tuned motor skills are gone. You know, if you had a pistol, you don't even realize it's still in your hand, right?
Yeah, correct.
Can be.
But that's if you're going to make the decision to carry a firearm to protect yourself, this is one of the reasons it's important to seek out training, to do a little bit of stress inoculation to where you're used to stressful situations, because the aftermath can be very tragic, as we saw in that case. Rob and I have responded to a lot of hot calls. I spent 11 years in the patrol division before I went into investigations. When you're rolling up on that call, you don't know who's good guys, you don't know who's bad guys. And when somebody's running around with a gun in their hand, they're perceived as a threat.
You know, and then there's also
go ahead. I was just going to say, generally the dispatchers will give them a warning. Hey, make sure you've put up your gun. But there's no guarantee that will happen.
You know, we all saw a case last year in Wisconsin, I believe it was, where a young man was involved in an incident, and he actually approached the police officers with a carbine slung around his neck, hands up, walked to him, and they just drove by him. I mean, I just can't. How crazy is that night when it's hey, you with the AR-15 is trying to surrender? We don't have time for that. We got other stuff to do. I mean,
and we've all seen unique situations. Rob and I can tell you about when we responded to the bombing site here in Oklahoma City. It was utter chaos.
Yeah.
We didn't know if we had a natural disaster, maybe some kind of accident with a gas pipeline, or if we had a terrorist attack. Is this an ongoing attack? So the situation, the environment is going to dictate a lot of times your response.
Some of the other stuff as far as preparing for the officer's arrival, you know, we've made the phone call, we've requested medical. You know, we've touched on that fact that let's don't have a gun in our hands if we don't have to when law enforcement rolls up. Now, if there's multiple violators, multiple suspects, and I have to maintain a position of cover, or taking a hard corner in my house or anything like that, it's something I'm going to let 911 know. I think there's somebody else there. I haven't seen them. This is what we've got. But once,
like the scenario I was thinking about, the doctor.
Yes.
Now, obviously, he I'm sure he made sure that there wasn't anybody else before he locks his firearm in his car, right? And turns his back to take aid.
He knew the people involved, and he knew that's all that was there. He had that knowledge. It was a known person, kind of a domestic related, distant kind of domestic related kind of incident. But once law enforcement is there, I want to make absolutely certain, because like Gary's talking, you're rolling in on a call like that. That's a hot call. That's something that you've got your radar up on your arrival. You're talking about the case in Wisconsin, and they drive right by a kid with a slung rifle. I've seen things, Gary's seen things where guys were just oblivious and didn't even see it. And that may be the case in that case. They may have just drove by and not even realized what he had. But it's a really big deal to me that if I'm the guy there and I'm waiting on the responding officers, as soon as they're present, my hands come up. I want them to see my palms. I want them to know that I'm not holding anything, because they know they're coming into a situation involving a firearm. And I'm telling you, their antenna are up and they're looking all over the place looking for a possible threat, because they don't know for a fact that it's done until they've arrived and been able to assess that for themselves.
Let me touch on something real quick too. It's kind of off topic, but Rob mentioned hard corner. We've used that in several articles that we've shared. All a hard corner is a position of tactical superiority where you can be out of sight from any intruder. It can be a corner of a room to where you can't be seen from a window, from a hallway, from a doorway, that gives you some cover and or concealment. I just thought I'd throw that in there in advance of all the emails I'm sure we'll get wanting an explanation of hard corner. When I first heard it, I had to Google search it and figure out what it was that they were referring to.
Another piece of that is once those officers have arrived, don't be surprised if you get put in handcuffs. Don't be surprised if they tell you lay down on your face, spread your arms, spread your feet, do this, do that. Just comply, follow their directions. I want to put them at ease as soon as I possibly can, because I promise they're arriving a little amped up too. And then once those things are going on, there's nothing wrong with saying, listen, I'm a victim. I've already contacted my attorney. He's on the way, but he's advised me not to make a statement until he's here. And exercise that right. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I promise.
I think when we come back from the break here, I think it's important that, just like we're doing a little bit of a mock 911 call, hey, here's the situation. And just literally, maybe Gary, you can be the bad guy, or not the bad guy, you be the police officer, the detective taking evidence that you feel like you may or may not have used against you. And Rob, you're the victim in this case. So why don't we'll cut to a break on this. And when we come back, we'll do some play acting, and you guys have your roles, you got your hats on, and we'll all be good with that. All right, folks, ccwsafe.com. We'll be right back after this. And go. You want me to bring it in, or you good?
I'll get it. Welcome back. We're still here with the CCW Safe podcast. It's Rob High, Phil Naman, and Gary Eastridge. We've been discussing today whether you should or should not speak with law enforcement if you're involved in a shooting incident, a critical incident that's resulted in a significant injury or death. We obviously have the experience to look at this from all sides, having been investigators on these cases as well. We just finished with talking about, I'd let a responding officer know that I want to cooperate fully, but I've contacted my attorney and he's advised me not to speak. and I'm going to heed that advice until he's present. And not to worry about making an investigator angry or a patrolman angry or something like that. It's not a personal thing. It's my rights as a citizen. But I have to understand that it could result in my being handcuffed or put in the backseat of a patrol car, but that's not a punitive thing. I mean, if an officer is involved in
that is a punitive thing, okay? Because those of us who are CCW carriers, you look at the charts of how many crimes do CCW carriers commit versus even police officers, and they're even lower than that. So these are not people who are used to riding in the back seat of a police car. They may have been on ride-alongs in the front seat, but they've certainly never seen the back seat of a police car. So that is a traumatic effect. Just a personal feeling of I didn't do anything wrong, a betrayal or something like that. I mean, it can be a traumatic effect for somebody who has always been on the right side of the law, and in this situation responded correctly, defended their life. They've got an adrenaline dump, and now they're seeing the police officers crushing them as a criminal, something they despise, and putting them in the backseat of the car. I think that is a real mental doggy downer, if you will, on that, and that could just crush somebody emotionally as they're getting in there.
Well, I think what Rob's referring to is what the officer is doing is not being done with the intent to penalize or criminalize your behavior. It's a procedure of gaining control until you can get the information. You mentioned concealed carriers. What if both are concealed carriers? One's may be a good guy just because he's a concealed carrier, and one may be a bad guy and still be a concealed carrier. So those responding officers are—
I'm only on the good guy's side, not on the bad guy's side.
Everybody, generally feels that they are in the right. But what Rob is saying is this is being done as a
procedure
in an effort to gain control of a very active and possibly threatening situation, not as a determination. You may well feel like they're treating me like a criminal, but you have to be patient enough to understand that once there's some semblance of order established, things will change. And that's also, it's just like Rob was mentioning what to say. There are I've heard some instructors tell their students, you tell the cops, I'm not saying anything until my attorney's here.
Yeah, that's going to get you in the backseat of a car with malice.
I'm sorry, I talked over you.
No, I talked over you first. I said that's going to get you in the backseat of the car with malice.
Exactly. You want to set the stage that I am a law-abiding citizen, and I was put into this position. So the way Rob couched that is, hey, I've already called my attorney.
Well, let's do that right now. Okay. So Gary, you're the police officer. You just rolled up on the scene. I'll set the stage here. There's been a firearm discharge. There's a bad guy who is TUBB in the front yard of a home. There's broken glass on the side of the house. And Rob High is at the doorstep with his pistol in his hand and wearing his pair of boxers and his T-shirt because it's 2:00 in the morning. And you're the police officer rolling up on this case. So let's go.
And as a first responder, the way I'm going to probably approach it is, I don't know who's good, who's bad. I'm going to say, tell me what happened. What happened here tonight?
And it's simple enough. I was a victim. I had to defend myself. I was in fear for my life. I was in fear for my family's life. I used my firearm, and I didn't have any other choice. Now, I've already contacted my attorney. I'm really, really shaken up right now. I've been involved in a very traumatic event, and I want to cooperate with you fully, but I want to make certain that I'm saying the things I need to say without getting myself in trouble. My attorney has already been contacted. he's advised me not to make a statement until he's present. And I choose to do that. I'm going to wait until my attorney is here, but I want to fully cooperate when I can.
And at that point, me as a first responder, and when I say first responder, I'm differentiating between the first responder and an investigative team that may respond in 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour later. I'm probably going to tell Rob, okay, have a seat in the back of my patrol car. The detectives will be here in a minute. I'll let them know what you've told me. And then from there, it's probably going to determine whether you are, what the evidence says. If I verify that's Rob's address and he's sitting there in boxer shorts and there's a guy with a mask and rubber gloves on, I'm probably not going to arrest Rob. I'm going to say, okay, as an investigator, I'm going to say, have your attorney call me. We need to sit down sooner the better. Here's my card, have them call me. If the evidence is not quite that compelling, I may say, well, Rob, I'm going to have to take you to jail until we can get this situation sorted out. If there's probable cause for me to believe that Rob has committed a crime, which just means a little bit more probable than not, I may take Rob into custody.
Now, Rob, so you're sitting in the back of this police car. Your neighbors are out. First you were just sitting in there, but then Gary comes back and says, I'm going to need to take you into the station and let these guys settle this out because I'm not sure what's going on here. He's probably going to handcuff you at that point, right? As you're riding into the station in the backseat of this car. Now, you've told him that you want to wait for your attorney, but now all of a sudden you're handcuffed in the back of this car. How many times in your professional police thing, once somebody had handcuffs on, even though they said they wanted an attorney, did they just start talking anyway? Because if you're not asking them questions and they just start volunteering stuff, they can't go back and say, oh, but I said I didn't want to talk to my attorney, right? So explain that if you would.
Absolutely.
Considered a voluntary statement at that point.
Yeah, it is voluntary. You haven't asked the leading questions. You've not tried to develop that information yourself. And I always referred to it in a report as an excited utterance. The suspect sitting in the back seat, he's already advised me that he wants to have his attorney present before he answers questions. And then he began making an excited utterance. And these were the things I heard. And those are 100% admissible in court.
Whether Miranda rights have been read or not, because you're volunteering that, not as a result of an investigator's questioning.
Right. Exactly. So I want people to understand that just because you said you want your attorney, you can still shoot yourself in the foot because you're trying to explain your way out of a night in jail, which, and it's just that if a police officer is involved in a use of deadly force, my understanding, at least in some departments, maybe it's nationally, that there's like a 48-hour window before they can be internal affairs or whoever's going to do the investigation can go in and ask them these questions. Now, me as Joe citizen, if I'm involved in a line of, you can ask me immediately. I remember, being involved in situations before, you got so much adrenaline coming out, your body literally starts shaking and all kinds of emotions happen. And this is not the time to be thinking about what exactly happened. You say the guy in a blue shirt ends up being a red shirt. Who knows? It's just things that you say because you're at a physical and emotional disadvantage can come back and be used in a case against you. And that's why what Rob and Gary are saying here, folks, is, less is more. The least amount you say, you identify yourself, give them your ID and just say, look, I'm a mess. I want to cooperate, but I physically can't right now. I just wet myself. And, that's a good dramatic affair.
You say
they won't put you in their back of their police car after that.
you say that. There are so many different reactions that we've seen, even with officer involved shootings.
Absolutely.
You come up and emotionally it just runs the entire gambit. You can come up and a guy is just broke down sobbing.
Right.
Never really dreamed he would be in that position. Or you could have a guy over in a corner throwing up. That's a natural response. Taking a person's life is not a normal thing.
Right.
And you have no earthly idea how you're going to respond to it. And all the way on the other extreme is I could be involved in a shooting and all of a sudden my district partner is Gary and he rolls up and he asked me, are you okay? And I'm like celebrating because I just survived a lethal event. I just survived and I am excited and happy. Every one of those emotions it just runs from one extreme to the other and they're all proper. So I have to understand how to manage that and how to maintain that.
As an investigator.
Yeah. As an officer involved in that shooting, I have to learn how to manage that.
Now, you said when we were talking about the show coming up here, you said that there's one reaction that always puts you on your heels when you roll
rehearsed. Yeah, you give me some kind of robotic, rehearsed, scripted. I'm telling you, automatically right now, my radar is going off, and I'm starting to dig. Yeah. I want to know what the relationship was between you and this person, and that kind of thing. We had talked about other things that you can say that might be important. Gary can tell you. Once I lose a scene, once the scene is broke down and gone, I can't go back and fix it. I can't go back and recreate it. It's the same way with evidence. It's the same way with witnesses. So if Gary and I are involved in a shooting and something happens and the responding officers come over and I know that you were over across the street and you watched the whole thing, I'm pointing you out. Hey, that guy over there, he was here the whole time. He saw what happened. You need to talk to him. You need to find out who he is.
In law enforcement, we refer to that as a public safety statement. Yeah. Even though I'm not going to go into details, I'm going to point out potential evidence that shows what I'm telling the officer is truthful. He threw the gun that way. He threw the knife. I saw it. I saw shell casings go over here. There was 2 or 3 people standing on that corner. One of them was a female wearing whatever. You give things that the officers can then use to verify your story.
One of the things, I did some ride-alongs in the wonderful city of San Bernardino, and my biggest takeaway is that all night long, officers are lied to their face, up and down. Everybody talking to them is lying to them. You guys' heads are shaking. That was a shocker to me because I don't deal in the world of liars, but well, we all do. But I mean, it just every single day, it just blew me away. And so, you could be telling the officer, look, I'm telling you the truth. And he's heard that 67 times that night, and 66 of them were lies. So it's important that you do point out the facts. This happened here, this happened there. We got a little over a minute left. Rob or Gary, you guys want to wrap this up for us?
I'd like to point one thing really quick. If you are involved in something like this, shut down your social media stuff, lock that stuff down. Don't make stupid posts about it. Don't try to be John Wayne about it. Just stay away from that crap. Shut it off, shut it down. Don't discuss details with anybody. Get with your attorney and ask him, if I need to talk to somebody, who should I talk to? And it may just be your attorney. You have that privileged communications with the attorney.
Yeah, for $500 an hour. Gary, how about you?
Well, I would just to follow up on that. I want to come across to that officer that I am the victim. I fully intend to cooperate. I just want to protect my own rights by having an attorney there.